Well, it's happened. Only a year after its worldwide launch, Atelier Resleriana is officially shutting down. Now, I'm making this video more from the perspective of a fan of the series than a fan of the actual game itself. Since, if you're familiar with this title, it's always been extremely mixed by the Atelier community since its launch. Before we get into the why behind all this, let's look first at the actual shutdown notice itself. This news only affects the worldwide version of Atelier Resleriana and not the Japanese version, which will continue support for the foreseeable future. Looking at the in-game message to fans, it states, "Thank you for playing the global version of Atelier Resleriana. It is with deep regret that we inform you that the global version of Atelier Resleriana will be ceasing operations on Friday, March 28, 2025. Ever since the launch of our service, we have placed our players' enjoyment as a top priority by constantly refining the game with diverse events and ongoing improvements. However, after assessing that we are unable to continue these pursuits at a satisfactory standard for our players, we have made the difficult decision to end our service. To all our players who have been with us on this adventure, we sincerely thank you for your support and we hope you enjoyed this journey as much as we did." This statement is so weird when you realise that this game has only been out for 1 year worldwide. In some ways I can understand this game being shut down since it wasn't very popular by die-hard fans. And similar to how Dragon Quest was back in the early 2000s, Atelier is still very niche outside of the Japanese audience, which obviously leaves support like this in a very strange position since they can either continue supporting the worldwide release but at diminishing returns or just shut it down completely. What's really strange is that on top of all this news, we still have a game in this series that's releasing this year called Atelier Resleriana, The Red Alchemist and The White Guardian. As someone who has some very heated opinions on gacha games as a whole, I was waiting on this release since it was going to be a really good opportunity for people like me to join the series. This is mainly because it's being sold as a single player non-live service game that you can experience for yourself with no additional updates. The developers have also stated that with this title, newcomers can join without playing the gacha game version. This follow-up title is still being released, but it's very strange now since it no longer has the previous game to rely on. It's pretty much just being snapped out of existence in the West. If you're not familiar with the Atelier series as a whole, well, they started as these alternative takes on JRPGs where there was a bigger focus on slice of life elements. Rarely do the stories ever have any huge world-altering events like most JRPGs have. And even when they do, they're never at the actual forefront, with the alchemy system taking center stage alongside the social elements. The Atelier series has really garnered a passionate fanbase from its humble beginnings, with most fans having a favourite protagonist out of the extremely long-running series. I actually think that the Atelier series might have the largest amount of protagonists out of any JRPG, and that's saying something. Which is why when Atelier Resleriana, Forgotten Alchemy and the Polar Knight Liberator came out, you would have think this would have been a match made in heaven since it features the old protagonists all with new redesigns in the upgraded engine. However, there was a big catch to this since the game was free to play and adopted a live service model with gacha game elements making characters extremely hard to pull. There are no shortage of videos on YouTube going over why people dislike this game, with the Steam page also showing a mixed reception. Now, I'm making this video solely as a fan of the series. I've not actually played Atelier Resleriana myself, but I have watched videos and people actually playing the game for themselves. I will say though, regardless of your actual opinion on this title, it just sucks to see so many developers' talent go to waste here. In the beginning, even as someone who can't stand the live service model, I was hoping that this title might branch out and help the Atelier series garner a bigger audience. Since the developers Ghost have had issues in the past with this series, having to release a game almost every year to stay afloat, however, they are in a better state financially since then. This release was definitely a two-ended sword for passionate fans. This is since on one end you have the idea that this game might be successful and garner a new audience, which could lead to the single player games having bigger budgets. However, on the other end of the sword, it also means that you have to put up with the gacha game and live service elements. Atelier Resleriana was very similar to Fire Emblem Heroes, with both games being gacha spin-offs. They was both designed for different audiences in a way, since single player fans could still enjoy the games that were coming out, but at the same time they also tapped into the mobile gacha market, which is very prominent in Asia. At the same time, as someone who was a big fan of these series long before the gacha games came out, it felt very weird seeing the characters be boiled down to, well, fan service elements, which depending on who you ask will vary from person to person. But at the same time, I'm just going to come out and say it, I don't think gacha games are very healthy for the game industry as a whole. Sure, financially they make tons of money, loads of money, even more than the single player games that come out. But there's just a certain dissonance with the audience that happens with these kinds of titles. If Atelier Resleriana actually took off like they planned to, I can't imagine that they wouldn't have leaned more into these elements that most die-hard fans wouldn't have liked. Plus, if you're just a casual Atelier fan, there's still plenty to look forward to from this series, with the new Atelier Yumiya coming out and it looks very promising so far with the most recent trailer. I just feel really bad for the die-hard fans that stuck with Atelier Resleriana, since all that time, effort and money is just going to be snapped out of existence. It's just crazy to me since live service models rely heavily on having a huge amount of income, way more than most single player games get. But in all honesty, this title's year-long existence should really be a lesson on the nature of games as a service, and in my opinion they just aren't worth pursuing due to how much of a time investment they can be. You know, as someone who was heavily addicted to Genshin Impact when it first came out, I'm very much aware of how predatory these kinds of games are. They really prey on that fear of missing out, and if you don't spend your money, it's usually your time. I get that at the end of the day people are free to have their own opinions and that these games are successful for a reason. But the reason for their success seems to be having players constantly coming back rather than just having a simple experience that they can take at their own pace. I mean no disrespect to Atelier Resleriana or the community as a whole, this is just how I feel on these kinds of games. What really irritates me though about these kinds of live service games is that this is the nature of every single one of them. It's inevitable that they'll be closed down. Even giants like MiHoYoverse with Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, it will happen one day. And with the stories of these kinds of games, they're never truly complete with the update model supporting more story content. Which at first can feel amazing since you realise to yourself, wow, there's like infinite story to this game, be it through character interactions or limited time events. But then, and this is coming from my own personal experience, it starts to sink in and you realise, hang on a moment, this story's never going to truly end, isn't it? And the actual ending of this tale is just going to be the live service shutting down. Now I understand that with some live service games there are versions of them that become single player games that you pay once for and get access to all the content. But they never seem to really appeal to both camps since now you have the live service model being condensed into a single player game and the unlock system always seems to be very controversial because of this. Regardless, I doubt Atelier Resleriana will get this kind of treatment since it's still getting support in Japan and I doubt they want to upset that audience. On top of that, as a casual fan, I'm just gonna miss the fun little comics they made with all the other characters interacting with one another. These were pretty cool. But yeah, those were my thoughts on the shutdown of Atelier Resleriana alongside the nature of gacha games as a whole. I still think Atelier has a strong place in the West since it still has a passionate audience that posts very regular on social media. I just think that the downfall of Atelier Resleriana really was an interesting case study to talk about, since it shows just how popular these kind of games are still in Asian audiences, and how over here it seems to not have meshed very well with more die-hard fans due to its live service nature. Regardless though, I hold no ill will towards it since it really didn't come at the cost of the single player games and everyone's looking forward to when Atelier Yumiya drops. But what are your thoughts on this Atelier Resleriana situation? I'm curious. Would you say that this game deserved the hate or was given the cold shoulder by fans? Either way, any feedback on this video would be appreciated. Thank you so much for watching and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.